Hey writers, you're listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast, where we bring you insights and inspiration for growing your self-publishing business. We're your hosts, Joni DiPlacido
and Stephanie McGrath. So this episode is a special Kobo in Conversation, where author Saeed Jones came to the offices in Toronto to talk to us about his latest memoir, How We Fight for Our Lives.
How We Fight for Our Lives is a stunning coming-of-age memoir. Jones tells the story of a young gay black man from the South as he fights to carve out a place for himself within his family, within his country, within his own hopes, desires, and fears.
So sadly, the interview wasn't done by us, but it was done
by actual professionals.
So Saeed is in conversation with Maxine Bailey. She is a dynamic member of Toronto's arts community, and for 18 years, she served as the Vice President of Advancement at the Toronto International Film Festival. So it was a great talk. We really loved it. People in the office really loved it, and we hope you do too. So please keep listening.
Hi, everybody. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Tracy Nosdely, VP of Comms here at Kobo, and I'm very pleased to welcome two very special guests, author Saeed Jones and book lover extraordinaire Maxine Bailey. As the Chinese curse goes, I think we can all agree that we're living in interesting times. However, there are many positives to these times, and I'm going to borrow heavily from Salon magazine about it. These are the things that we can look at. Progressive art is being made. Diversity in television and film is growing, however slowly, but growing every day. Black writers are finally being published widely, studied, and celebrated. Diverse voices are finally being heard. And one of the voices leading the charge is our guest today, Saeed Jones, author of How We Fight for Our Lives. This is a compelling memoir about growing up Black and queer in America, which is a country not unlike our own, where it has a history of not being so kind to people who are either of those things or both. In his book, Jones takes a deep dive into our society and explores how culture struggles with accepting anything perceived as not normal, quote unquote. We learn about his journey through religion, sexuality, queerness, and how those complexities are defined and understood in an American family. Interviewing him is someone that, she doesn't know this, but she's a great friend of mine, Maxine Bailey. We're especially thrilled to have her in the house today. It's Kobo's 10th anniversary, as you know, and Maxine has been with us on our journey virtually since day one. She is, of course, an avid reader. She has been a Giller Prize jurist. She is a powerhouse at TIFF, where she was instrumental in taking the Toronto International Film Festival from a scrappy Toronto-based festival into an internationally celebrated one. And she has come to be known for encouraging and giving encouragement and advice to young people interested in finding roles within the festival, within film, and creating opportunities that would not have existed without her. I cannot think of a better person to join Saeed today in conversation. So with that, let me get off the stage and let's let the conversation begin. Please give a warm welcome to Saeed Jones and Maxine Bailey.
Hey guys.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good.
Welcome to Toronto.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are we treating you nicely?
Yeah, it's been cute. It's been cute. Good.
Cute.
Yeah. Cute is a truly neutral. It's a good neutral. People, often credit me for being, they're like, you're candid, you're brave, I'm like, what other option do I have? Look, you can see and hear very quickly if, I'm lying or I don't like what's going on. I couldn't lie.
Okay.
It's great.
I took it a different way because puppies are cute.
Puppies are cute.
A city I don't see as cute.
Oh,
but,
that's fine.
Okay, let's keep going. So, give me 5 words that describe you.
Oh my, colorful, piercing, probably. Oh, is that a sex joke? Black, bold. Have I gotten to 5?
Yeah.
4, okay. Yeah. Queer, yeah, that matters.
Good. Those wouldn't have been the 5 words I was picturing you.
Oh, okay.
But that's interesting. So I want to know about your online moniker, Mr. Ferocity.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
For me, I was interested in, so when I joined Twitter in 2008, I was going into graduate school. The wonderful novelist Saeed Jones, American Merit, she was one of my teachers in graduate school. She's actually known me since I was a junior in college. And so she had a blog about the writing life and I started a blog. She was on this thing called Twitter and I joined Twitter. And then around 2010, I ended up teaching high school, and the youth are terrifying. And so the Ferocity was just going to be my secondary account where I would be myself. And so it was like my name, my identifying information wasn't attached to it because I was teaching 9th and 12th grade English. Right. And so I had the opportunity at that point to kind of, use that opportunity to create a persona. And at the time I was, and I still am, really interested in the way that Black, gay, particularly men in my interest in media, movies and TV in particular, are, relegated to being the sidekick. There's this like magical Negro, the fabulous magical Negro role where they exist to give advice and wisdom and don't let your boyfriend treat you. And here's a better, and then that's it.
And they don't get to have sex.
They don't get to have sex. We don't know about their relationships, their families, or anything. And, so it was like that. And because I'm interested in politics and everything, and the yes, and the we can talk about Trudeau. I wanted that range. And then I liked ferocity because at the time, the way like yes or shade, these words get picked up in media by straight people, by boring straight people. And lose their power, and you can kind of feel like your language is being stolen from you. So, at the time it was like fierce was one of those words. And I was just watching all these straight people say, oh, that's fierce and that's fierce and that's fierce. And I looked at the definition of fierce and it's feral, wild, dangerous. I was like, ooh, so that's where it all came from. I don't think about it so intensely now, but I do think it's interesting that, from 2010 to here we are, bordering 2020, that something I learned in the book is, identity is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think that's an example of it.
True, true, so true. So this book is how we fight for our lives. And you fought for your life.
Yeah.
You fought to be where you are today.
Absolutely.
What do you want us to fight for? And what do you want everybody to get from the book?
Right. Thank you. I want everyone here and all of the people that you, because of your jobs and your different platforms and your communities that you impact, understand that we are all fighting for our lives. Every single one of us, myself included. Just because I wrote the book doesn't mean I'm not fighting for my life anymore, right? And I believe that is just true universally. It's the one thing that I'm really willing to, that's the hill I'll die on. And I think if you do not believe you're fighting for your life, you are like Daniel in the book. You're like me at certain points in the book. I think when we believe like, oh, I'm not struggling, right? Everything's fine. And we've all done it, right? Everything's okay. What are you talking about? And you are like treading water. Just like, oh, everything's fine. Everything's great. We've done that. And, I certainly experienced in real time that dynamic, but working on the book for 10 years, basically from the earliest version of the essays to what it became, and just having to look at myself as a character and, family members and everything, I just saw like, oh, this is so interesting. Saeed, you really thought you had it figured out. You thought you could, yell and command and bravado and have sex and all of these different things and write poems out of the dynamic. I had so much sex. We cut out whole chapters. Okay. And my editor, and I was like, why? I was like, this is a great sentence. He was like, I understand. And my editor is very nice, wonderful person. And he just said, we're not learning anything else.
Okay.
Fine. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. A lot of sex.
So you dedicate this book to your mom.
Yes.
Her name's Carol Jean Sweet Jones.
Yeah, good name.
It's a lovely name. It's almost lyrical. Tell me about her.
So, both sides of my family are originally from Memphis, Tennessee. And my mom raised me as a single parent. She worked for Delta Airlines my entire life. Before I was born and when I was younger, she was a flight attendant, which I think is important in that, we come from, working class, kind of paycheck to paycheck family. But there are a lot of, and I now know more so, a lot of people who, having worked in the airlines, have gotten to see the world. And though maybe they're still living paycheck to paycheck and everything, they've been out there and they bring that worldliness, a word that comes into the book at one point, they bring it into their lives, and my mom was like that. Every night dinner, it was like a different cultural influence. You know, she was always studying. We might have Mexican food one night, and the next night she would make Korean curry. You know what I mean? And then, you know, fried chicken the other, you know, it was just all, she was just curious about the world. She read 3 newspapers a day. My mom, she was very beautiful, very stylistic. She loved makeup, and I would watch her put on her makeup and try it on when she was gone, and all of that. But something that always cracked me up is that she had her purse, like the cute, fashionable purse. And then she had what I called her bag, this big, ugly, leather black bag that would have the 3 newspapers she read every single day. Every single day she read the Dallas Morning News, the USA Today, which I was like, girl, why? And the New York Times every single day, and it would just be full. And then there was like old magazines shoved in there, and then she'd be reading, what was it? Sue Crafton's The Alphabet Murders, you know, all of that. And she, with her everywhere. And we'd get on a plane and she'd be bumping every passenger, you know, it just drove me crazy. But I think that's like important to think about, you know, like, because, you know, when I was selling the book, you know, I would say I was raised by a Black single mother. We were living paycheck to paycheck. And you see the thought bubble, right? Like,
kind of go,
yeah.
Got you in a box.
Yeah, I mean, publishing in the United States is still 89% white. So here I'm assuming 95% white in Canada. and so, you know, you want to go, wait a minute, like it's not, you know, let me bring some of the nuance. So I brought that to the book. And then, you know, through another friend of hers who also worked for Delta and traveled, she was introduced to Nichiren Buddhism. She chanted Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. It was like Tina Turner in the movie. I watched that damn movie so much as a kid. I loved it. And Tina and I actually have the same birthday, November 26th. So it was a lot of kinship. But, you know, she started practicing Nichiren Buddhism in her 20s before I was born. And so that's another dynamic you see in the book. Like, and this happens all the time, right? Where there are these existing family wars, basically, that we end up being born into, and we don't know what's going on. You know, and you're just like, I'm trying to get my Christmas present or whatever, and here's this hot, or, you know, for me, I felt like it's a Cold War. There are a lot of silences, you know, and then it explodes, you know, at one point in the book for me. But yeah, that's who we were.
So your Buddhist mom, you catch her one time dancing around
yes.
to a song that you see your mom not being your mom, but being a woman.
Yes.
Talk to me, how old were you when that happened?
Yeah, I was a kid. So that was like, I don't know, 10 or so. I'll say, that was one of the times. My mom was always, just last night, just the other day, I was looking up the Kelly Clarkson song, Walk Away, came out, I think, around my senior year. Anytime it came on, my mom was at the front of the room dancing. And you know, of course, the more embarrassed you are, the louder she starts. Right. So that was her. So yeah, I captured her dancing to Prince's I Want to Be Your Lover. I did that in part because just as I used the title to make it clear from the very beginning, this isn't just about me, this is about us. And I want you to know that. This book is not a vacation from your identity. In the same way, I used the poem to introduce the idea that my mother is her own person. She's not a literary device. Her humanity and her life story has value beyond me, you know, because, you know, I'm a gay man if you haven't picked up on that. Yeah, are we all good? We made it there together. But, you know, I see books, I see movies and narratives created by men of all sexualities, and the women in their lives, I think, are often treated like columns. They're treated like architecture. And they're there because, you know, she held me down and she sacrificed. And yes, she did all of that, but she was her own person. So I felt, and
it was nice to get an inkling of
a dash of it. Yeah,
the single mother trope.
Yeah.
It was just like
the joy
to Prince.
Yeah,
and then when you start looking at the words in that particular
what a sexy song.
Yeah, yeah.
Even when I went back and looked at the lyrics, they were actually bolder than I remembered. You know what I mean? I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh yeah.
I want to be the only one that makes you come line break running. So good.
And that was your
mom. So good. Oh, yeah.
I know. Okay, so you know, your mom was working hard.
Yeah.
Trying to look after both of you. And during the summer of '98, you spent a lot of time alone.
Yeah.
While your mom was at work. And it was the summertime and you're hanging out and, you know, you kind of spy these, you know, neighborhood kids playing. And there's one young man that caught your eye.
Both eyes.
Okay, let's talk about what your both eyes saw.
Yeah, Cody. I mean, he was the first crush, or rather the first crush where I even had an opportunity to mess up, as I do very quickly. But yeah, he and his brother. I lived in a big apartment complex. We literally lived on Main Street in Louisville, Texas, home of the Louisville High School Fighting Farmers, like metaphor, metaphor, metaphor. Okay, it's just like so basic. It's like the most basic American, like whatever. And yeah, they lived, you know, a few buildings over, and I would see them playing, and I just had a crush on Cody. We were the same age. And yeah, I mean, he ended up being the first person that I remember. I always hold that memory is an unreliable narrator, so that I remember calling me a gay slur. And
but you, at one point, you thought he was going to be your friend.
Yeah, we would like hang out, you know, and I think kids do this, you know, and particularly, you know, we're turning 12. And so, you know, your social patterns start to change. And so you end up that thing where it's like, well, I'll hang out with you like when we're at home during the summer or after school in the apartment complex. But if you see me in the cafeteria at school, you stay over there. You know, that was our kind of, and then, you know, later I realized I did the same thing. And I think I mentioned at one point when I see, and this is by chance, I mean, a formative summer in all kinds of ways, but Matthew Shepard will be killed that October. Right. And James Byrd Jr., a black man, was killed by 3 white supremacists that June, 4 hours from where I was living. All of this is happening at once. But I note that at one point when I finally saw Matthew Shepard's photo, I had the same thought. I was like, oh, what a sweet kid. I'd hang out with him after school, but I wouldn't hang out with him at school because I would be embarrassed. You know, like kids have such an innate understanding. A hierarchy, and they and they understand power. They really do. Like that, they are always like, who's on top, who's on bottom. They're really, you know, they feel it. It's all they think about. And why wouldn't they? You know, it's the only thing they understand.
So you and your mom, because she's such a news junkie, and you're watching the news when she comes home. And then that's when you hear about James being dismembered in Texas. So I don't know.
Yeah,
want to just touch on that?
Sure. I mean, it was formative because it became, so the federal hate crimes law, which took like 15 years, by the way, in the United States to become law, is based on James Byrd Jr. and Matthew Shepard. Their names were in the law. 1998, 2019, it like just happened a couple of years ago, by the way. He lived in Jasper, Texas. He accepted a ride home from work because it was hot, incredibly hot in Texas in June, and he couldn't, you know, didn't have a car, from 3 strangers at a gas station. They turned out to be white supremacists. They beat him up, and when he was, I guess, you know, about to pass out, you know, but still alive, they chained him to the back of their pickup truck. And yeah, it's like Oprah was like, she covered this a lot because she happened to be in Texas at the time doing a series of episodes. They chained him to the back of the truck and dragged him for miles until his body literally came apart. And that's that June. So it's like first chapter is like you see me and Cody and figure this out, and you turn the page and you're like, whoa, you know, but that whoa is what it felt like, you know, and I think it is what it feels like for so many people. I mean, I went back to Dallas for the book tour last month, and, you know, teachers were there and family members. And just 2 or 3 days later, a young black woman was shot and killed in her home, the same area in Fort Worth, Texas, Atiana Jefferson. A police officer shot her within 4 seconds.
She was playing a game.
Playing video games with her nephew.
And somebody shot her through the window.
And she think about that. It was like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning in Texas, where everybody's got a gun. Everybody's got a gun. And, you know, she hears something outside her house. What's going on? And so she goes to get the gun that she legally owned. And the cop shoots her from outside her house in 4 seconds. You know what I mean? And that was just after I'd been talking about James Byrd Jr. So I say that whoa dynamic. Yeah, that sense of feeling just knocked about where the personal, the political, and kind of the national story, it's all happening at once. We see this with Me Too, right? I mean, of course, you know, people are experiencing sexual harassment and violence at work, in the relationships, and then you turn on the news and it's there too, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you wrote, being black can get you killed. Being gay can get you killed. Being a black gay boy is a death wish.
Right.
And one day, if you're lucky, your life and death will become some new artist, new project.
Yeah.
That really, especially after just reading about James and Matthew Shepard and you and your mom watching it in that moment. And your mom chose to get up and go to her room.
She turned off the TV.
She turned off the TV and went to her room. What did you do?
I went to my room too. Yeah, I think and you see that a few times in the book. Part of it was just the way our apartment was laid out. The living room was in the middle, the bookcase with all books that, you know, James Baldwin, that becomes very important. And then our bedrooms are on opposite sides. And yeah, I mean, we would just retreat. We retreated
separately.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I think, someone in Boston said that she was like, do you think, part of the reason you and your mother struggled to talk about sexuality, which becomes that, is because she was tired? I said, yeah. There's a class element, where, everybody doesn't have time to be reading all these great books and studying up on culture, and you know what I mean? Like, some people are just trying to pay bills.
Right.
And, for a lot of my childhood, my mom was working 2 jobs. She would work at the airport all day long, at the DFW airport, and then she would work at the makeup counter at the department store at the mall. You know what I mean? And that's why I had so much time. Yeah, that's what she was doing when I was off with Cody, or often reading all of these books. Yeah.
So going back to Baldwin, you mentioned, so you discover James Baldwin.
Yeah, Another Country.
Another Country.
Woo! What a moment. What a time.
How old are you? You're quite young.
I was 12.
Wow.
I had to look it up. It was like do the math and
Right.
Yeah.
That was a big book.
It was mind blowing, and it's interesting. I've reread it since. It's actually not my favorite novel of his. Like I've read Giovanni's Room probably like 5 or 6 times now. I've only read Another Country a couple of times, but as an adult, I'm struck by the incredible violence in the book, which, knowing what we know, it feels like foreshadowing. But as a kid, and when I talk to young people, it's somewhat similar. Like, for young people, they're just like, I don't know. Like, I was talking to a woman the other day, Black woman, and she said, just seeing Black people working in marketing in the movie Boomerang when she was a kid, she was like, that was a big deal. I didn't know Black people could work in marketing or advertising. Just she was like, I know the Cosbys and like for everything, but she was like, it did matter. A Black doctor, a Black lawyer. Right. So for me, reading Another Country, I was like, white people are having sex with Black people. I didn't know you could do that. And then a character, the main character is bisexual, is queer. He's having sex with women, and I was like, okay. And then he's having sex with men, and I was like, whoa. And then he's having sex with women again. I was like, wait a minute now. You know what I mean? Like, so I think when you're a kid like that, the representation and it does matter. It does matter. It's actually not nuanced at all. You're just like, it's possible, And so I thought I was going to get in trouble for reading it, which was why I kept reading it. Yeah. You're like, I would love some 12-year-old kid, in the suburbs of Toronto, being like,
when you look at the content of the book, the amount of sex that was in the book. Do you think there are going to be young children?
Oh yeah,
around
absolutely
trying to figure it out?
Oh yeah,
how they can continue to be fighting for their lives?
Yeah, I hope so.
So you read in the book, something drops out of the book.
Yes.
So talk to us about that. And
the
talk
Polaroid.
To us about how your mom dealt with that.
Yeah, so I find a Polaroid in the book.
It's a forbidden book.
It's a forbidden book.
Something hidden.
Something's hidden, and it was like used as like a bookmark, I guess. Because my mom went to college for a few semesters and kept a lot of those books. I think this is one of those books. And there was a photo dated like Jackson, Mississippi, which is pretty close to Memphis, Tennessee, where we were born and from. And there was a picture of a guy. It was like 1982 or something. It was dated on the back, and I didn't recognize him. This man. And but tribal recognition is real. You can find your people. And I was just really curious about it. And so when my mom got home from work that day, and mind you, I'm hiding Another Country under my pillow when I go out to talk to her. So, and I'm like, who's this man? And she, she's coming home from work. It's June. It's hot. She's exhausted. She's like, literally, can you like wait a second?
Give me a minute.
But of course I didn't. And I'm like, who is he? And she eventually learned that they were friends when she was younger. They went on road trips. That was one of them. And then she's like trying to end the comment. I'm like, what? And she finally was like, and then he found out he was sick and he killed himself. And she walks out of the room, which is what my mom would do when she was like, I'm actually done with the conversation. Because I would not stop asking. I was very, very inquisitive. And I was just like, sick of what? I was so confused. What did one have to do with the other? He looked very young. And she says AIDS, and she closes her bedroom door. It's a grenade drop. She was very dramatic. She was very dramatic.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whoa, girl. Yeah.
Wow. So you kept on reading more Baldwin and Toni Morrison and things like that. And at one point you talked about Baldwin feeling a bit like jazz.
Yeah. I liked it. I mean, it was what drew me to.
You were 12. What did you know about jazz?
Oh, music is big in my family. Oh, it was really big. I mean, I wasn't allowed to watch MTV until late middle school or something. So, but I could quote Anita Baker, book, verse, and chapter. You know what I mean? Like Tina, Shaka Khan, all of Sly, the Sylvester, all of it. Yeah. So I was really well versed in music. It was the one thing.
I was like,
yeah, and it was and I guess the other thing, it was just sexy. I didn't know books could be sexy, could be cool. Because of course the books that you get in school when you're a kid are decidedly not cool, generally. You know, they're often by dead white people. They're not by people like you. They're not writing about, if you're a Black kid, they're not writing about people who remind you of your family members. And Baldwin did. And later when I found Sula, I was like, oh my gosh, Sula kind of reminds me of my mom. I hadn't seen a woman depicted in a book, and I knew, I didn't understand the Nobel, but I understood that Toni Morrison was a big deal because she was on the posters in the library at school. So I knew that this was important.
Right.
And here's a woman that reminds me of the women I come from. And I was like, oh, you can do that. Yeah.
So let's go back to libraries, because a lot of stuff happens in libraries.
Multi-purpose space.
So in the library, they play a big role in your life.
They do.
You researched being gay.
Rather unsuccessfully.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mixed results.
So there was like some stuff there that you didn't want to know.
Yeah, I mean, and this is an important lesson. I didn't, and I think I was wrong. I mentioned that I didn't trust the librarian.
So you went and did
to ask her. So I did it on my own. And I now know that I bet she would have. I know a lot of librarians and teachers and booksellers who are like, here you go, baby.
Right.
Don't tell your parents. Here you go.
So you did your own research.
I did my own research and
not very well. So you also had your first sexual encounter.
Woo, we're fast forwarding. This isn't all happening when I'm 12. Yeah. In the same library, which is funny because in Louisville, it's a suburb of about 80,000 people.
How old were you? You were like,
I was like a sophomore in high school.
Okay.
15. The library is where City Hall is, where the police department is, it's all in the same complex. And I started using the computers. We finally get the internet about a couple of chapters into the damn book. Thank goodness we didn't have her on our phones yet. It would have been a very different book. But yeah, and so I go and I was very unsuccessful. I've been trying to find anything gay on these computers, and it's like ad blocker, but I was like, when people are like, I'm good at Twitter, and I think that's where it came from. My comfort was just because I was basically a dad walked in and sat at the computer next to me, and I hadn't noticed. And I just heard someone say, "Are you into that?"
Wow.
And I almost jumped out of the chair. I was terrified. I thought I was in trouble. And my mind is racing on what do I say? And before I can answer, he says, I'm into that too.
Wow.
15 years old. And he was.
And how old was he?
He looks like now that I'm an adult, I'd probably say he's probably in his mid-30s. But at the time I was like, oh no, he looked like he was 50. Because kids think so old. But he looked like he was, married. I eventually noticed a wedding ring. I probably had kids. I'm very, very much of a type of where I grew up, of the dads I grew up around. And so we go into the public, or he tells me to meet him in the restroom. And I went.
Slow down slightly. So you are doing something that is going to be frowned on, digging up through the internet,
totally
trying to find out if you're gay or not, or how gay are you. That's what you're trying to do. And then this possibly strange man comes to sit, and grown up.
Oh, yeah.
Comes to sit beside you and invites you to a bathroom.
Yep.
You don't even think twice.
I do. I was like, is this, one dynamic, one motif you see is me going, anytime anyone is nice, generally, if you include this as being nice, my impulse is this a trap? Right. Cody, when he's like, let's go hang out, I'm like, is this a trap? And it was. Yeah, but I still go. I mean, what is it to be young? That is part of it. That young people, it's why as adults, our silence, our refusal to talk to young people about things that we think are difficult or too much is just dumb and dangerous. Because I'm telling you, they're gonna do it anyway. If they don't get the answers from you, if they don't feel you or someone they can talk to about, they're gonna figure it out. And you don't know who they're gonna go to. Right? And I think that's really important. It is all difficult. It is inherently awkward talking to young people about sex. Oh my gosh, absolutely. But
and you hadn't talked to your mom about it at all.
It was a total silence. And so, yeah, but I felt I had so many questions and so much desire. You know, it felt like I think to be a young person, it feels, you get to a point in puberty and, desire, it feels like a contained explosion. You know, you're just like, I got to do something. You know what I mean? And yeah. And then so if you add the dynamic of being a Black gay kid in the suburbs of North Texas in 1998, marriage equality at the time. I mean, so my junior year of high school is the Lawrence v. Texas Supreme Court decision in the United States. That is the law that until I was a junior in high school, it was technically illegal for people to have sex with someone of the same gender. And I knew that. I knew that as a high school student, that like technically, if I were in intercourse with another man and police walk into, we could get charged with sodomy. You know, so that is the culture in which I grew up in. So it's like, yeah, I understand it's scary now, but you have to understand the context in which someone goes, I like that too. That is such a power. It's like a lighthouse, you know, in kind of the darkness that I felt, you know. That our desire to connect, whether that is sex, whether that's a conversation, whether that's art, it is so powerful. And I think we have to honor that. Because if we don't, we, like you see in the book, right, that there's a pattern where I end up in like really dangerous situations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're not going to dwell on the library, other than you're going to tell us you have great relationships with
It's
the library
great.
now.
We're all good.
Places to go.
We're all good now.
Okay. So you mentioned your mom being a Buddhist.
Yeah.
But your grandmother's not a Buddhist.
Super
and
not.
You spend summers with your grandmother. So talk to me about that dichotomy, because you've got your Buddhist mom, who you chant together with your mom. And are you currently a Buddhist?
Not really. I don't practice it. And I think if you need to practice Buddhism, like my mom would chant twice a day, and I don't do that. But it's a life philosophy that I certainly draw from. But yeah, I mean, you know.
Talk about your grandma.
Totally.
Different.
So super different. Mildred is not a storyteller. She's not a joker. She hates cooking. Honestly, she usually votes pretty conservatively. You know, she preferred to like sit in the corner and like read the Bible and mind her business, and that's it. And but she's incredibly passionate about her faith. And you know, like I think a lot of parents, but certainly single parents, come to rely on their broader family to help raise. And listen, kids not in school, like for the holidays in the summer, that's a really expensive time for working class parents, because the kids are there all day long, and boys especially just eat everything in the refrigerator on the first day of summer vacation. And you're like, oh my God, So she sent me to stay with my grandmother, and done that every summer. And so that Cold War I mentioned over faith, by the time I was 12, 13 or so, 14, it wasn't cold anymore. Because I think what happened was that they'd given up on my mother, on saving my mother. But because I'm a teenager now, I'm starting to talk back, and all of those things, they felt like this urgency. My grandmother in particular, this is the summer, we've got to save him. So, I was used to going, it was like when you go to Memphis, you go to church, fine. But they started going to a different church, an evangelical church, a white church in the suburbs. So it was culturally different too.
And she started to double down on you.
Double down.
She doubled down on
Triple. I mean, we were going to church, I think like 4 or 5 days a week, not including Sundays. That's like the whole week. I told someone the other day, I was like, honestly, my memories of that summer, like I would be at the apartment complex pool, which you see at one point. I would be reading, because Oprah, this is when Oprah starts having Toni Morrison on. So I was reading The Bluest Eye, struggled with it. I didn't understand it. And then we would go to church. That was my whole summer,
Good time.
Yeah, it was a hoot.
Good time. Okay. And if I mention Mark Wahlberg to you, what does that conjure up for you?
I mean, the Calvin Klein ad. He's a complicated figure. Do you know the whole thing with Mark Wahlberg?
About him being Marky Mark and model.
Yeah.
And then also being the idol.
Right. Also, do you know he committed a horrible hate crime when he was young?
No, I did not know.
Yeah. There's all these things. I mean, that's what's like how there were all these things that were just natural occurrences in my life, right? But then they had bigger meaning. So for me, as a kid, that summer, my grandmother found, I'd ripped out of one of my mom's magazines, the infamous, it's still pretty old, it's hot. The Calvin Klein ad where he's grabbing himself. I mean, look up, he actually did the fashion show, and he's like grabbing himself on the runway, which is like, still, I'm like, wow. So I kept that. And my grandmother found it and freaked out. But yeah, when he was a teenager, him and his brother violently attacked an Asian American man in Boston. And they kind of got off because they were like juveniles. But isn't that something? Like this image of desire is connected to the violence?
You choose the desire, because that's a struggle for you.
Absolutely.
The book, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can kind of move on. I wanted to kind of get to a lot of stuff.
I love this.
You had a lot of first. Oh, we gotta. No, we can't talk about any more sex.
Okay.
let's.
We can. It's up to you. Okay.
Well, I was gonna mention the botanist.
Oh, girl, let's skip that.
You want to skip it?
No, I mean, I would say the botanist. I think what's the lesson there is toxic relationships are not linear.
So, do you want me to kind of give a?
Sure.
So the lovely Saeed, who, as young people do, they make some good choices, some bad choices. Saeed met this gentleman, and I would say that would be a bad choice.
Bad choice. Bad dude.
But they had hot sex. That's all you really need to know about that. Read the rest of the book.
Yeah. Very complicated.
Okay?
Yeah.
Cool. So we're not going to talk about him. We are going to touch on briefly, when we were backstage, you were talking about, the coming out.
Oh, yeah.
So we do have to just say,
Sure.
all this time that you've been going on, you've been having these great, you've had this thing with your grandmother, she found the Mark Wahlberg thing. You've had some instances with your mom, but you've never really told her that you are gay.
Yeah. I think
and you're in university now.
Yeah, I was a freshman in university. Freshman in university. I'm so proud to use this Canadian lingo briefly. It's very exciting for me. Yeah, so my mom and I, so here's the thing. My mom and I had a wonderful, vibrant relationship. But queerness and sexuality, I think because of her upbringing, right? And just the time and all these different things, it was a silence. It was the one thing, the one thing we couldn't talk about. But everything else was great. And what happens, I think, when we have these dynamics with family members is that it only becomes more difficult to talk about it. Because then you're like, well, why ruin a good party, right? You know what I mean? Where you're like, well, you didn't talk about it. And sometimes you bring it up and people say, well, you didn't talk about it. And you're like, it was hard. So that's what it was for us. And I remember being like,
do you think she knew?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I was on book tour and I saw one of my middle school English teachers and I was like, and she was like, I didn't even finish the question. She was like, yes. Yes, I knew you were gay in the 7th grade. You know what I mean? Yeah. But the thing that freaked me out was like, what if she doesn't handle it well? What do
you think was going to happen?
I think about worst case scenarios. What if she never speaks to me again? What if what if our wonderful relationship for what it is ruined? And instead she was like, it was pretty good. She was like, okay. She was like, are you using protection? Are you having? I was like, yeah. She's like, okay. And then she calls me back later and it's like, I forgot to say I love you. I love you. And that's when I started crying. And then she just said, you seem like you're happy. And that's what matters, But then you see in the next couple of years, something that I don't think just gay people experience this, particularly like in the United States, something like Thanksgiving's coming up and the holidays, where you go back into the closet.
Well, I think most people tend to behave for that. They show their families a certain self, right?
Yeah, we think when you're with your family, that's what it is to be polite or to behave. Right. But often we're closeting ourselves or silencing ourselves, right? I'm not going to talk about politics. I'm not going to talk about this issue that I'm really struggling with because wouldn't that be rude? We struggle with that. And so, yeah, my mom and I, we just kind of went back to our corners, even after I'd come out. It was really difficult. Yeah.
And so you never really shared with your mom, like any boyfriends?
No. Which was a shame. I mean, in graduate school, it got a little better in part because at one point I finally wrote her a letter. I went home for like winter break at one point and it wore me out the whole time. And I wrote a letter on my last day that I was like, men are trash and I'm dating them. And you dated them too. So like, I need advice. You know what I mean? I was like, listen, and I try to be very careful. My mom raising me as a single parent, I think was just a fact of life. I don't think it's a value judgment. But I was like, you are a single parent. And I don't have another parent to talk to about this. And like, this is happening in real time, And really the questions, it was simple stuff, like who should pay on a date? How do you know if a guy, truly, how do you know if a guy is a good guy? Is it enough for a guy to be attracted to you? How do you know? When's a good time to say, I love you? Just the simple, basic stuff, But I think...
Did she have to respond to that?
She did. Oh my gosh. She got back to me right away.
By a letter, or was it one of your help?
Oh, that's a good question. I think she wrote me a letter too. I think she wrote me a letter too. I mean, I think in some ways my mom and I have a literary heritage. She was a very passionate reader. Yeah, and also I think I think all the time, sometimes it's easier to write a letter or an email than to like talk to someone in person. Yeah.
Okay, so everybody here is going to read the book because you're
It's quite good.
Fascinating. And it is quite good if he doesn't say so himself. But I do want to touch on a couple of things because you are quite the Twitterer. So, you've been tweeting all on this trip. The thing I was most excited when you tweeted a couple of months ago was you wanted everybody to get together and rescue Meghan Markle. Can we talk about that?
Indeed, we can.
Is it you and the Wakanda army?
I think we might. Listen, it's going to take everybody.
Okay.
It's going to take everybody.
Talk to us about Meghan, because you got some very strong thoughts about her.
Yeah, I mean, so part of it's so complicated. How much time do you have? Are we good? Is it like 7 p.m.?
You want us to?
Oh, we're good? We're good? Okay. Okay, good. I'm just like, because I'm like, listen. So here's the thing. Okay, yeah. First thing, you got to understand generationally, I'm 33. So I grew up with Prince Harry and his brother and William. I remember, and it's not in the book, but I remember going to a wedding actually with my mom and walking into the apartment, and she was standing in front of the TV, and we were watching CNN and found out what had happened to their mother. And listen, that's something that matters to me. Boys and their mom, like I get it. Okay. So I've seen what they experienced. I've seen the beautiful transcendence, particularly Harry. I think the way he talks about mental health, I mean, that is no easy thing. There are people who have far less, to lose or gain, who won't admit that they've struggled with grief or depression, and so I do admire that. I think he's done some life work.
Right.
And she seems like she has too. And she's quite lovely.
Toronto kind of claimed her.
Oh, good.
She lived here for quite some time.
Oh, lovely. I didn't know that.
She was shooting.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad I'm on the right side of history. And I love Suits. Oh, my God. Okay, I won't. But oh, my God. Oh, my God. Okay. What a show. Okay. So knowing all of that, and then just listen, I think it is, I feel very confidently as a Black person in the way that I said, and I feel as a queer person, we know when racism is afoot. And I don't care what you say. You can come up with all these media narratives. People. Whiteness is very eloquent and very creative. We know what's going on. You know what I mean? And I think and this happens all the time. And that's the whole thing with the royal family. They become avatars for whatever we are working through. I get that. We're using them to talk about things that we, for whatever reason, don't talk to each other about. But the only thing that's more painful than racism or homophobia is the gaslighting. When it's like, you just slapped me in the face, and now you're going, why aren't you smiling? And you go, you just slapped me. No, I didn't. That's what it feels like. It's painful. Misogyny, and people are gaslighting publicly. And Kate seems lovely, but I mean, in any scenario where women are being framed in this, that's toxic and not healthy. It's evil, frankly. And then obviously, the fact that she's Black, that is totally so much of the subtext of what's going on. And people, all the other, I just don't buy it. And beyond all of that, I think it's mean. And to go back to where I started with, so for her, that's a lot. Could you imagine being Prince Harry? Like just as a person, I get he's a royal, and I'm not down with that. Colonialism, it kind of sucks. Kind of trashy. So don't get me wrong, but just imagine just as a person, you lost your mother in the way you lost your mother because the media chased her to her death. Could you imagine just waking up this morning and being like, is it going to happen to the mother of my child now? And that be a somewhat reasonable concern. That's not out of left field. That would keep me in that bed. Keep me holding her and holding that cute little baby. Oh my gosh. And
your tweet said that you wanted to go rescue Meghan, Harry, and the baby.
All of them. What's his name? Archie? He can come too. Well, come on, Archie. Come on, baby. Yeah, I just feel, listen, I wrote a book called How We Fight for Our Lives. My mom, as you see in the book, she died way too young of a heart attack the night before Mother's Day. I understand that these are things that matter to me. And so I leap into them. But listen, life is so hard. It always has been. Not just like the last few years. It's always been difficult. But I think we have a better conversation about how hard things are now. And knowing that, if you can spare cruelty, shouldn't you?
Yeah.
That's just what I think. If you are somewhat aware of the control you have over a situation, in which case the media has a lot, don't you want to spare cruelty? I spend time by myself because it's difficult to and a friend I'm glad told me who lost her mom, she was like, listen, you don't want to look up at brunch on Mother's Day Sunday and you're surrounded by families with their moms. You don't want that. So plan. So I might take a little trip out of town, or say, I try to pay attention to how I feel. I might have dinner with a friend. I plan for it. And I give myself space to feel however I feel. And it's different all the time, because grief is, I said this yesterday in an interview, but grief is really queer. And it doesn't care about time. You know, so the
it'll pop up whenever.
Totally. I always tell people, like, if you've experienced deep grief, you know, you could walk to the little cafe back there and someone could walk by wearing a cologne that might remind you of like an uncle that was beloved, you know, and you're like, tears in your eye. You're like, I was just trying to get coffee, you know? So grief doesn't care. And so I think all we can do is kind of know that and let it ride out.
You did have one comment. I've got two more questions.
Okay.
Quickly. So this is really, you had a comment about a Canadian politician
Ooh.
who chose unwisely around a Halloween costume.
Oh my God.
And you also tweeted about
He's
that.
ruined hot politicians for me. I'm watching are any of you watching Watchmen right now? No, it's really good. Thank you. Ruined the senator, because I was like, he's hot. It's trash. I can't trust him. Reminds me too much of Justin Trudeau. Because it was like, what, 3 times? 3 times, my dude?
Yeah. Okay, and then one more question.
Okay.
I've got like 85.
The lightning round. I love it.
Has the book been optioned yet?
You're the only person crafty enough to ask. People are interested. I'm always willing to hear people out. I am. But this isn't just a book, right?
This is your life.
It's my life, and it's my mother's life.
And it's your family's
My
life.
family's life. My grandmother, Mildred, she's read the book. She was very supportive, you know? She never told me not to. And so I feel such a responsibility. So,
I mean, there is something interesting when you're writing about yourself and other people, that you have to be loyal or honest to those people.
Yeah.
But if you humor me and your book was optioned, who would play you?
Ooh.
Now you want to play that game now, don't you?
Well, that's not that, because that's just fun. That's just fun. I mean, I feel like for a younger, because it have to be several people.
You play your mom.
Oh my gosh. I mean, part of it is I think these are great opportunities for new actors. For the young side, I don't know who that would be. It would be some brilliant kid that none of us have heard of, and then we're like obsessed. Kind of like Stranger Things. It's like, oh, we didn't know these kids, and now you're like, yeah, exactly. So something like that. I love Andre Holland. He's in Moonlight. He plays the love interest in Moonlight, and is in something right now I can't remember. And then, who was it the other day where I was like, oh, he's pretty cool. Oh, a Broadway actor whose last name is escaping me.
Play your mom.
Mom, that's hard. It's hard because younger. I mean, of course, I want to be like Angela Bassett, you know, because I'm a Black gay man. But, you know, you see my mom when she's younger. So I don't know. I love Regina King. But the same thing, I just see that it's not really an answer. I'm just like, who do I stand? Which is like every Black woman in Hollywood.
And I did have one other question, because now you've got super fans like Roxane Gay, Jacqueline Woodson.
Okay.
Those women love you.
I love them.
They're besotted by you.
My queens.
Okay. So, are you the new young, hot, Black gay author?
I don't think so. I think we're starting to move, and because of like what you were noting, like the work you've done with, what you did at TIFF, you know, and that we are seeing in publishing, I think we're moving away from there can only be one, you know, and there's more space. So I feel more of like a sense of generation. I feel like I have a lot of peers, which is exciting, right? I mean, you know, there's Janice Smith, wonderful poet, you know, certainly Roxanne, Jeremy O'Harris is a young Black playwright. Slave plays on Broadway right now.
Talk about that.
I've hung out with him. We've had dinner, you know what I mean? And so it feels like there's this moment where, and Terrell Alvin McCraney, who I think is just tremendous, you know what I mean? So I feel like I'm a part of a generation.
Terrell wrote Brothers?
Terrell wrote the brother-sister plays, and he wrote the screenplay for Moonlight.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have time for a couple of very quick questions.
Lightning round.
I always get to ask the first one.
Okay. She was like, it's in my contract. I love it. Hey.
You started by saying we are all fighting for our lives. Is it important that we talk about that fight?
I think so. We have to have purpose, you know, because sometimes you can just be like, it's all about me. I'm sure the point is not to then go, well, I'm fighting for my life, so I get to be a jerk now. You know, it's not that. I think it's recognizing that we're all struggling. And when we're struggling, we make mistakes. You see, I make a lot of mistakes in the book. I'm not always kind. I'm in fact very hurtful when I'm struggling. So I think it's like context for us to keep in mind and go, oh, okay, what can we do? And that's the starting point for work. You know what I mean? I'm interested in What happens when two people are in a space, Saeed and his grandmother? There's no antagonist. They're both trying their best. She did everything she did because she loves me. It was wrong, but she did it sincerely, and hurt still happened, right? So how do we deal with that? Thank you.
I'm so glad I get to ask you this, because I was in the car alone driving to go pick up my kids, and the New York Times Book Review podcast was on, and you were being interviewed by Pamela Paul, and I was like, you know what, I'd ask him. And then I forgot you were even coming in, and I'm like, oh my God!
Like, it's all happening. I love it.
Thinking about memoir, and you're a young writer, and the cliche is upcoming birthday notwithstanding, and the temptation to the cliche is wait until everyone all of the named are dead, and you haven't done that. You've written young, and it's sort of the thing that makes me think of is, do you perhaps wish? I mean, you're the person you are now who writes this memory of yourself then,
right?
Do you perhaps wish that the person you used to be maybe had captured this in his own view?
Oh, no.
He's better.
No, I mean, I think part of youth is delusion.
Right.
I was delusional. I think one of the reasons, that it's so hard in our struggle is that someone can go, Saeed, you look like you're struggling, right? And 90% of us would respond, no, I'm not. Like, what do you mean? We take it personal, we're offended, we're hurt. We feel too uncomfortably seen. And so we resist it, So I think, I tried, something you see, the reason I say a decade, right, is that this is 2019. One of the climaxes of the book, someone does literally try to kill me my senior year of college. And I started writing about it right away, And you see in the book, I'm not accurately depicting what happened. And I wanted to show that in the book, how we try to maintain control even as we're losing it. So I think if Saeed was still going through the heat of those particular dynamics, maybe it would have been pretty, maybe it would have been whatever, I've read my diary. I wasn't a very good writer when I was younger, but I think it also just wouldn't have been wise, it just takes time, yeah.
Thank you.
Hi. I never ask questions at these
I
things,
love this. Okay.
and I'm very nervous.
Okay.
So I wrote it on my phone.
Oh, I love it. I love it. A woman with a plan. She's like, I'm not just going to sit here and be nervous. I'm going to take action. I love it.
So I listened to the audiobook version of your book, and I found that hearing your story in your own voice kind of added a whole other level of emotional impact for me as a reader. Did you find that you had an emotional distance from your story while you were recording the audiobook because you had already written it and you just kind of had the job of reading it aloud? Or did you find an emotional weight behind kind of reading every word of your story into existence for another person?
It definitely acted upon me. Yeah. I think I write with a sense of distance. I write with a sense of distance and a kind of coldness, but reading it, and I recorded it this summer, 2 days, which is pretty intense. And you're just like alone in the studio, and there's like the engineer and then the guy outside, and they would only tell me kind of at the end of at the bottom of a page, you stumbled on this word or, whatever. So a serenity kind of takes over. And so I think just the time, reading it in such a fast, compressed space, the silence I was when I didn't have my phone. And we know writing something is different than speaking something, right? And absolutely, saying some of the dialogue I found actually really emotional, and I would have to kind of check myself. Even simple stuff, like the first time I realized I'm speaking in my mother's voice, that was a moment, or painful things that were said, like the pastor, that was hard, you know what I mean? It did impact me. And then the end of the book, when my mom passes away in it, that was really difficult. And the producer was very subtly like, would you like to take a break? It's like, yeah. And I went in the restroom like, oh my gosh. And then reading the acknowledgements is actually when I started crying, because just thanking, you all know how many people it takes to publish a book, any book. And it takes far more to publish a good book. So, I just felt tremendous gratitude, and it was overwhelming. So it was cool. But also the other thing is it's helped me understand how readers feel. Because I write with a sense of distance, when the galleys went out in May and I hadn't done the recording yet, when people were like, I was crying. So I was like, thank you. I didn't get it. But when I was reading it out loud, I could feel the waves. And then you literally end up in the ocean at the bit. And I was like, oh my God, Yeah, it was special and cool. I don't know if I ever want to do it again.
One last question.
Yeah, thank you for that. Hi,
You
Queen.
saw how nervous I was getting, right? I was like, I'm not going to be able to ask the question. Oh, no. So nonfiction, we all know that it's extremely powerful. And I credit certain memoirs for finding me at the right time in my life and saving my life, for giving me hope, right? And I haven't read your book yet, but it seems like it could be one of those books for a lot of people. And so my question, I guess, to you, I know you spoke a bit about James Baldwin and everything, but were there certain memoirs or even just books that you yourself credit for, saving your life or giving you hope? And what would those be?
Absolutely. Hope is not, I guess it's what I arrived at, but hope isn't something I think about. But Mary Carr, The Liars Club in particular, and again, she's writing about East Texas, which is very different from where I grew up, but she captures the voice of that part of this, and that was powerful. And the lyricism, her writing, and then Cherry, which was the follow-up, it was a book I went back and studied because I felt, I am a poet, but the book is not written in verse, but I tried to bring the lyricism into it. And I think Mary Carr showed me how to do that. So she's a writer I look to. And then Baldwin, I read No Name in the Street this summer, and I think you should read it if you haven't. It's his memoir that he writes in the 70s. So it's, and it opens basically with Martin Luther King Jr. being assassinated, and then Malcolm X is assassinated. And he's spending time with the Black Panthers. He's being pulled to Hollywood. A friend of his is unjustly arrested. It's like all happening. And it's a very different color of Baldwin. He still does move towards hope and love always. That's just the miracle of the person he was. But he is really shook. You know what I mean? And I think reading it in summer of 2019 was just so powerful when we're just like, what is happening? It's like, I'm looking at my memoir and I'm like, are things better or worse than 1998? I actually don't know, And so to see him really honestly capture that, as well as class differences, it opens with him mentioning that after MLK died, he was wearing a suit. And he said that he'll never wear that suit again because he was so heartbroken. He said in an interview, it was very beautiful. And then one of his childhood friends calls him and says, I need that suit. It's really lovely that you can afford to not wear that suit anymore. But if you don't want it, I will. Yeah. And so he has to go home and he's like, so it's a powerful memoir, and it's a powerful look at this person whom I think we know well, but I felt like I was seeing it in a different way. Yeah. Thank you.
It's a great book list, everybody. Write those books down. Go read them on Kobo. And top of the list, of course, is How We Fight for Our Lives. Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. I think one of our very best. So thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you for listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast. If you're interested in Saeed's memoir, make sure to check out our blog because we'll have a link to the book on our store. Or if you're interested in learning how to grow your sales, visit KoboWritingLife.com.
This episode was produced by the team at Kobo. Editing was done by Kelly Robotham. Special thanks to Tearjerker for providing the music, and thank you to Maxine and Saeed for joining us. If you're ready to start your self-publishing journey today, sign up for free at kobo.com/writinglife. Until next time, happy writing.